Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and actually today I am joined by my agent and another author extraordinaire, Danya Kukafka. Danya is the author of the national bestseller Notes on an Execution, which won the Edgar Award for Best Novel in 2023 and was named the New York Times Best Crime Novel of the Year. Notes on an Execution was an indie pick, a finalist for the Goodreads Choice Award for Fiction, and received a cover review in the New York Times Book Review. Her debut novel, Girl in Snow, was also a national bestseller, an indie next pick, and a Barnes & Noble Discover pick. Both novels have been optioned for film and television, and her work has been published in more than a dozen languages worldwide. She works as a literary agent with Trellis Literary Management, and she's here today to interview me about my upcoming release that she worked so hard on, Pinky Swear. So thank you, Danya.
Thank you. I can't believe I get to step in as a host today to talk to you about your book, which has been many years in the making that I've been along for the ride for. So this is going to be a really fun conversation. I have so many, character and theme questions for you, but I also really want to talk about craft, which I can get really, really nerdy about as we've worked together. So I am just so excited about this book. It is now coming out in a couple weeks, which is really exciting. But we've been working together on it for many years. And as I was flipping through it to think about what we were going to talk about, I realized I hadn't read it in a while, and it was so exciting to dive back in. And especially because I read it, like 15 times, like 2 years ago.
At least.
It's like an old friend, right? So it was so exciting to go back in. And I thought maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about what the book is about, who our main characters are, what the premise is. So I'll let you just do your little spiel.
Absolutely. Well, and Danya, really, like this book is a whole different book, I think, than the book that we started with. So, it's your baby as well. So Pinky Swear is a story of Lexi McNeil, who is in her late 30s, married to a man who has 2 older children, and she desperately wants a baby of her own, but she cannot get pregnant, stay pregnant. She has what they call idiopathic infertility, which just means there's no medical reason, she just can't have a baby. Her best friend from high school, there were 3 of them who were super close in high school, and one of the 3 died their senior year, and so they lost touch. She lost touch with her best friend Mara. But Mara reappears into her life. Lexi's living in Denver, and Mara shows up leaving an abusive marriage, and Lexi takes her in. The 2 feel close again, and Mara actually offers to be Lexi's surrogate, which seems like the perfect solution to her inability to have a baby and this desire, this thing she wants more than anything in the world. It all seems to be going swimmingly until 4 days before the baby is due, and Mara disappears. And so then Lexi has to figure out where is her baby, and and then she goes back to figure out what Mara's life has looked like for the last 16 years that they were out of touch. So
there's also a little mystery about what actually happened when they were in high school as well, to their third friend, Kate. So you made this book very easy for me to pitch because that premise is just so good and so intriguing from the very first page. I'm wondering, was there a moment, likely before we started working together, when you really felt the spark or the beginning or the nucleus of this book? Was there a moment where you said like, ooh, interesting, what a question? Like, where did it really begin for you?
So there's a scene in the book, which, is the scene. And that scene was in my brain. It's a scene about a pregnant woman. It was in my brain, like even years before Pinky Swear became what it was. And I wrote the book originally around that scene, with a law enforcement officer in the mix, because all my books and all the first 16 books were, featured an officer in the law of some sort. So I wrote it that way, and it didn't really work. The point of view character wasn't we weren't immersed enough in her world. And so then of course my life turned upside down, and people who've been listening to the show long enough know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, you can go almost anywhere and figure it out. But and I just thought, oh, interesting. So now this story feels like it has to be really personal, and it has to be a question of what does it feel like when you feel like you've been betrayed by the person who knows you the best, who loves you the most? And for Lexi, that relationship she had with Mara, especially I think after they lost Kate, it was the sense of that there have been these three girls who kind of raised each other. None of them had a family environment that was super supportive. And so I think I got to the point where, and this is like now I realize I'm like not really answering the question specifically, but basically I had this scene became more about that the mom of this baby rather than the woman who was actually pregnant. So it was the being the surrogate. So it was, what do you do when you realize you feel like you've been betrayed by somebody who you trusted so fully? And then on top of it, I think the question, it was just so appealing, right? The issue of like, she's going to lose a baby. She's lost a baby that she's never even met. The only thing she wanted in the whole world was her own child. And she was this close. And then it sort of disappears. And I just don't think, I mean, as a mother, as a mother, as a sister, as a daughter, we all know sort of, we get that like pit in our stomach of like, oh my God, that's horrible. And so it was just, after that, I was like, okay, how do I set this up? Because I knew what I wanted to do. And, as you know, I did it, like 9 or 12 times.
Yes. I want to talk about the friendship between Lexi and Mara first. I'm so curious sort of how your experiences with friendship, with female friendship, with old friends, new friends, they have this sort of like magnetized friendship where they know each other so well, but also on such a deep level that they don't actually know the details of each other's current lives, right? Like you can know someone like a sister, but still not know what she's been up to for the last 10 years. And I think that is absolutely true, right? And that was what I gathered here. So can you talk a little bit about the trust between the two women?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, so there's this idea that, first of all, when they were, getting to know each other, you're at that stage of life where, you really, those girlfriends, I think at least for young girls, those are sort of the pivotal, like crucial relationships. They're the people that like they're at school when you're getting bullied or, or dissed by a boy or whatever the things that are happening are. And they're those people that support you because, of course, your siblings are oftentimes, if you're close, even if you're close with them, there's an age gap, and I mean, even if you think about like what you're experiencing in seventh grade versus ninth grade, right? Like worlds apart. You can't compare them. Versus now, 2 years as a gap with a sibling seems like nothing at all. So I feel like those friendships become sort of your stabilizing force or destabilizing, depending on like the way the friendships work. And also, they're the people who you say, "What do I do about this?" And they're not rational. They have no more information about the world than you do. Their brains aren't fully formed. So they're making, they're as, likely to make a bad decision as you are. So, and yet, it just feels like nothing matters more than those friendships. And when one of them ignores you, or, I mean, and I think everybody's had that experience, right? Where you like feel like somebody is your best friend until one day they're not. And you're like, well, what happened? And they're mad about, who knows? You wore the wrong, I mean, back in the day, right? You wore the same jeans as them on the wrong day. I mean, it was so mercurial, and I didn't have friends like this. I had a sort of bigger group of friends, and we were sort of in and out. But I did have one really close friend. That relationship was always super charged. It was like sisters. We fought all the time. People were like, "I can't even believe you guys are friends," and it was true. We were almost like bad for each other, and I could see pieces of that in these friendships. But also I feel like those girls, even though, they knew enough about their home lives to know nobody had it great, each other's home lives. And they also knew enough to be like, sort of to surround each other in the moments and provide support. But yeah, but they didn't ask questions. I think that's part of the age too. You just sort of like, there's this sense of like, whatever's happening at so-and-so's house, she probably doesn't want to talk about it. And you don't want to admit that your parents are a little crazy, or that they don't seem to love you in the way that you want to be loved, or that your sibling gets more attention. That's stuff that, it's not that it doesn't matter, but it's not front of mind at that age.
This book asks one of my favorite questions, which is, how well can you actually know somebody, right? And especially over a long period of time.
Yeah, you're asking the
You
wrong
know,
person.
people are always going to hide bits of themselves, either consciously or unconsciously. And what I really loved about this book is that it opens on the moment after that fracture, right? After, well, pretty closely opens on the moment where Mara disappears, and Lexi's left sort of saying, "Wait, what?" And what I guess my question is procedurally, right? You've written so many police procedurals in the past. You know how a thriller has to work, right? You know the structure of a book, you know the structure of a mystery, what needs to happen. But this time, it's not a cop, it's not a detective, it's not anyone in law enforcement who needs to solve the mystery. So, how did you approach Lexi having to solve her own mystery?
Well, I mean, I think from a
Mhm.
lot of experience with this book, but I actually that was hard. I think because I feel like when you write about a police, even if they're emotionally involved because they know the victim or the situation is draws emotion because it's about, we all, I mean, I think even seasoned police officers, obviously situations draw real emotion from them, but there's always that sort of the professional distance. And with Lexi, there's no professional distance, there's no profession. And I think I struggled with like how emotional she got because I think it was easy to feel like she was just gonna wallow in it, which I think is what I would have done I mean, as a human in the moment, I would have been like, oh my God, it's over, my life is over, and of course that's deeply dissatisfying to read from a character. So there are moments of that. There are moments where she sort of lets herself, or she sort of wallows a moment and then has to, but there's that also the sort of same momentum that you have in a police procedural, which is what the fuck are you going to do about it, right?
Mhm.
Like, okay, this horrible thing has happened. Now what's your, how do you fix it? What do you do?
You got to go find the facts,
You
right?
got it.
You
Yeah.
have to uncover what needs to be uncovered and find the facts.
Right.
And so in that way, I mean, do you think of this book as a mystery?
I think of it more, it's God, this whole like, is it a mystery? Is it a
I
suspense?
know. My favorite space to live in.
I I think there are elements of mystery in it. I really feel like it's more of a suspense. Well, I actually don't know, Danya. That's such like that. I feel like these questions get those terms get all messed up in my mind. But yes, there are elements of it where she's like, what? Because I think Lexi believes through the book that there's no way that the woman she knew and loved for all those years as a child and took in and supported through that what had happened to her in her marriage, there's no way that woman just like took off with my baby. There's no way. And yet, of course, you can say that in 1 minute and then see evidence and be like, oh my God, she did that, exactly that. She just took off with my baby. So there's, she has to figure out what to do. And so there were moments of it where it became a little bit like a police, in my mind it's similar, right? What does a lay person, what does a regular person do to solve a crime? You've got to sort of track what they can find, and there's little bits of evidence that
Yeah.
Marley, unknowingly, unwittingly, like we all would, and Lexi clings to every single little thing, even when some of them mean absolutely nothing. She just and she goes a little crazy. I mean, which I think I mean, I think that's also fair. This is her. I mean, it's her child. I think that's the interesting thing for me is like there's also this ticking time clock, which we know, right? Which is that in the day that Mara disappears, she's still pregnant. We know she's still pregnant. I mean, we assume she's still pregnant. But there is this idea that if Lexi doesn't find her, there's a chance she won't be pregnant anymore, and that means there's a chance that that baby will be somewhere totally else, right?
Mhm. The stakes are could not be higher. The stakes literally could not be higher. And it was really fun to work with you on how to put those clues in, like where we were dropping little bits of evidence and little bits of, like adhering to the classic mystery structure in
Yeah.
some ways, right? Like, okay, this chapter needs to reveal this chapter needs to reveal that. But of course, underneath there are these larger human themes of family, redemption, friendship. Can you talk a little bit too about Lexi's home life, like both her parents and her marriage, and sort of what she wants from the world in terms of a family and relationships?
Yeah, it's funny. So, Lexi is an only child, and she had her mother was pregnant, and a baby was stillborn, her brother, and I think that deeply traumatized her parents, understandably. And I think Lexi always felt like she was too much, like too needy, too emotional, too. So lives inside this kind of like. a little bit of a, confined, always feeling like she doesn't want to ask for too much. She doesn't want to rock the boat. And she marries an incredible man. He's actually, Henry's, I think, just really lovely. But he says to her, I don't want to have any more kids. And so she makes a decision to use a sperm donor. And, she's like, I really want to get, and I love Henry because he doesn't say, well, if you do that, we're done. Right. He's like, he's open to the fact that that's not what he wants, but he respects what she wants. And so I think, what she wants, of course, I mean, now she's like in her sort of, she's like 37 and she realizes this is her time. If she's going to have that baby, right? She sort of has to do it. And it feels like probably the biggest risk of her life, right? She kind of went to college and she then got out of college and had a job and met Henry. And she's really sort of just been carried along by a series of sort of safe choices, which would be all her parents would ever sort of have approved if they'd approved anything she did, which she didn't seem to ever feel that they did. And they're gone by the time the book starts. So I think, but I think she realizes at that age, and there is something that happens, I think, in your late 30s where you're like, whoa, this is like half of my like actively good life is here. I'm going to be 75 or 80, that things really slow down. So it's like, what do I want? And I think Lexi realizes that that's what she wants. And then she sort of goes after it in her own, with all she can in her own way. And I sort of proud of her for realizing what she wants and going for it. And then I think it just makes the stakes that much higher when she thinks she's going to lose it.
Yeah. I can absolutely feel that for her. And I think the story opens with sort of this backstory of she's always been passive, right? She marries Henry when she's very young. He already has partially grown kids and they're fully grown by the time the book opens. And he's at a different place in life than she is. And without any spoilers, can you tell us sort of how the experiences of the book affect who Lexi is as a character?
I mean, it's funny. I don't think Lexi has very much confidence in herself early in the book. I don't think she has that much I don't think she's had experiences that have sort of reinforced, girl, you got this. Like I think everything her parents provided and then, through college and then Henry, as you said, was much older. He's 15 years older. And again, I don't think he was controlling her, but I think he was very capable. He already owned a home. He already had two kids. He already had a very good job. She didn't need to work. It's always been sort of like, it isn't, so she never had that like, and I think a lot of us have that experience kind of right out of college where we're like, oh, it's all on me, and she sort of did that, but she had this like little job at a law office and then she met Henry pretty promptly. There was no like, if you want this thing, you're going to have to make it happen. And I think this was the time when that happened. And I think when Mara first disappears, there's all these questions about, well, what, from Henry and from the police who show up to ask questions like, well, did you have, a contract, let's say surrogacy contract? And did you, where has she been the last 16 years? All these questions that Lexi couldn't answer. And so I think the moment those moments make her feel again, like, oh my God, I've just messed this up. I can't do this. And I think what the book does, when the police sort of take off and Henry has to go do, work stuff and she's on her own, what I think it does is it teaches her resilience. It teaches her that, that she can do it. And then more than that, she's like, I will find my baby. And I love that for her. And I think I imagine a story for her, after the book is done, where it changes the trajectory of her life, at least I mean, who knows what her life will look like, because, like you said, no spoilers, but at least I think she's going to walk away with like, a confidence she's never had, which I think I think that's not as sad. It feels a little sad to think about somebody being almost 40 and not having sort of the confidence to know they can do it. But I actually feel like that's so common too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's been sort of just slotted into her own life, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, and had everything set up and she just slid in and everything was fine until she realized that her one true desire was not being attended to. And I do think that the course of her growth over the book is one of my favorite things about this book. She has to go get what she wants because the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
I want to get a little nerdy and talk about craft.
Oh my God.
Because that's
And
like my favorite thing.
Such
I
a craft master. I had an MFA and I got a second MFA by working with Danya. So,
thank you.
oh
I'm
my
honored.
God. Yeah.
So can you tell us sort of how this book evolved over time? What it started as? I have a couple questions about how it compares to your other books as well, but first, sort of just like what the first draft looked like, how it evolved over many, many years to become what it is.
Well, so like I said, I mean, the very first book, the point of view character was the surrogate,
Mhm.
and a police officer. Those were the sort of two points of view, and it was set in Boston. I mean, it really everything about it sort of changed. And the idea was, she was having a baby for somebody, and then the baby, vanishes, and she has to figure out what happened to this baby because the parents want it back, and it really. In hindsight, like it didn't really make sense the way that was set up. But I am a unfortunately not a plotter, not an outliner, not a, it just get in there and sort of write my way out of whatever. And that's, I've tried, and the more books I could do, the more I think, come on, figure out how to be a plotter. But now at least I write 100 pages and have somebody look at it really clearly but that when I wrote the whole thing and it clearly didn't work. And so then I set it aside and I did actually another two more books of the Badlands thriller series, Far Gone and Up Close. And then I came back to it with this sort of new idea. And I mean, when I first wrote it again, it was one point of view, right? It was only Lexi. We didn't have now there are these really fun scenes from 2008 when they were in high school, because of course it makes sense. We didn't know them. If you're only getting the sort of current point of view of Lexi, the question was like, how do we understand how close these girls were? How do we understand sort of what happened to them that year? Um,
And why would she trust her so much, right? We had to feel that feeling, really.
Right. It is funny because for whatever reason, and it seems like a little bit like a shortfall on my side, shortcoming on my side to not realize like, wow, we're going to need to believe her. I like to make a lot of leaps of faith, as you know. And it's like, so then I lose the reader because they're like, well, we don't necessarily believe that. So I think the iterations were about making her seem more logical and less emotional, right? Because I think the first draft of the book was also highly emotional because it was the first time I'd written about somebody the thing was actually happening to her. And not only that, but it was such a thing, right? It was this specific thing, is like you said, that I'd never written a book with stakes this high. So I was like, of course she's going to be an emotional mess, but that's not useful, right? It's maybe we get a spot of that, but that's not driving the story. So it was about pulling her out of that, letting her touch down into those emotions, but then driving the sort of not wallowing in it, but being productive, moving the story forward, being solutions oriented for her, and then also figuring out how to imbue those three girls in high school with real, so we really understood and we're attached to them. I think was really important because they all really weigh into the story. Even Kate, which is interesting because I think along the way, when I queried it, I had an agent say to me that she would love to look at it if I was willing to make Mara a point of view character.
Oh, interesting.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I don't
And
think we ever thought of that, did we?
yeah,
Or we
well,
really?
I
Yeah.
was immediately like, no, I just because
Yeah.
I feel like if you made Mara a point of view character, I don't believe you can write a point of view character and leave out information the character would have. That drives me a little
Correct.
crazy. That feels
I
like
agree. You can't withhold for the sake of withholding.
it
I
feels like
totally.
cheating. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I was like, I can't be in Mara's point of view without telling everybody where Mara is and why she's there. Like that doesn't but you were the first person to say, well, what if we worked on like Kate's point of view, which I thought was I mean, and Kate's gone. She's dead before the book starts, obviously before she's dead when they're in high school. But it was like because she's the one person that we don't get to see otherwise. So that was brilliant.
And she also gives us insight into Mara as well, like new insight into Mara that
Right.
Lex can't see. So it was kind of this fun little triangle. And then once we set you off on revisions, were you working in the document where we were editing together? I can't really remember. Were you retype? Did I make you retype it?
Yes,
I
you made
can't
me do.
remember.
First of all,
I probably did.
you just literally posted recently about doors. I swear to
Oh
God,
my God.
you were like, so your level of line editing, and I feel like we'd already done all these revisions, and then I get a line edited document. Every page is like solid red, and I'm like, oh my God, how does she do this? But I think there were like, I actually believe there were like something like 200 doors in that book.
Really? You were at 200?
I was
Okay,
at
you're not the
my
only
memory is
one.
234. It's possible that I'm exaggerating because that means there was like two doors on each page. But my memory is there were so many goddamn doors, and you were like, we don't need the door. And it's funny because even to, like I remember when I first started writing books, I was one of those people who'd be like, well, do we have to mention that she goes to the bathroom and has breakfast? Like I finally,
Mhm.
after a few, I got rid of that. But there is still this part of me that shows up and is like, well, we're in this room. What is, how do we get into,
Yeah.
I mean, so I follow every
It's
step.
instinct for so many people. I mean, I do it too. I feel like, it's what I call, we talked a lot about empty actions, right? Which
Yes.
are doors, turning your head, laughing, smiling, sighing, nodding, shaking your head.
I had them
Um,
all.
yeah, well, everyone does them all. And I'm always like, you can say something more interesting here. And that was a really fun part of this process. And I feel like you can really see how clean and more intimate the characters feel in the final version of the book.
I mean, yeah.
So
And
fun.
that's, I mean, also it was crazy to go. I think the original draft of this book was like 105,000 words.
Mhm.
And I think we ended like in the low 90s. And I feel like it
Mhm.
was all doors and nodding. Like I just was like,
Mild laughing and Jordan nodding.
I
Yep.
mean, really, but
Yeah.
it was amazing. There was one thing you said at some point, and I'm gonna mess up exactly how you said it, but there was this idea of like when people process really big emotions, they don't process them necessarily by being like, wow, that feels like this, and you don't,
My heart is racing. It's in my
yeah,
throat. Yeah.
right. Yeah, there was
Yeah.
no I wasn't allowed to have a
Yeah.
heart race. Danya was tough, right? But no, it's so valuable. But it was like there was I remember this scene in the hotel room where she's like having some emotional reaction and she's watching like her name bounce across. In a hotel they like have your, welcome Mrs. McNeil, whatever it says. And it's like there's sometimes I think that's true. Like when you are really processing something kind of highly emotional, there'll be some like little thing you focus on that's totally unrelated. And it did make me think like, oh, that is really how we are when we, process emotions. And yet we're so used to it's this telling. We're so used to, and it's a really hard habit to break. I'd like to say the first, you've read the first 100 pages of the next book, and I'd like to say I feel like I'm
Yeah.
getting naturally better
You
at it.
kicked it. Yep.
Donna's voice is in my head going, "Oh no, you didn't just shake her head, did you?" I'm like, "There's no door. There's no door there." But it was a real process. The thing is, I'm such a concrete thinker. Like I'm such a person who's like, if you say to me, "Do this thing," I'm like, you got to give me three examples of what you mean, because I have a really, maybe it's a kinesthetic learning thing. Like I have to do it, feel it. So a lot of times I feel like you'd say something and I'd be like, I don't even know what she means. Like, and then when you described it and made a couple of examples, then I could be like, oh, this was her example. So how does that apply to this? And then eventually, you sort of get the but I honestly never had. I mean, that's the gift of editing. I feel like you're going to get 1,000 queries after this because the gift
Come
of
at me. I'm ready.
exactly the gift of having an agent who spent the amount of time that you did on this book, like there's not, I mean, that's over and above. I've
I
never
can't help
had that.
myself. I love it so much. It was just when I first saw this book, I felt the emotional stakes and I saw the plot, I saw the structure and was just like, I know exactly what this is and we gotta do it. And it was such a satisfying experience to do with you. And then to find the right publisher for it,
Mm,
and to sort of have an amazing editorial experience with them and then have this really exciting publicity tour lined up. It's just all been pretty magical.
it's
Uh,
been, yeah, such a joy.
yeah.
Such a joy.
Yeah. So my like kind of final question is, this is a departure for you from your procedurals in the past.
Yeah.
Did it feel different for you to write? Does it feel different for you to talk about? And sort of how does that look for you? You've been writing for so long and you have so many books, yet this one has taken a little turn. What's that like on your end?
I mean, I love those. I love the procedurals too. And they always feature like a strong woman. A strong woman's always at the center of every book for me. Lexi, in some ways, is the least strong woman of any of the protagonists, at least at the start of the book. But it does feel different. I mean, I think for one, and actually, you and I talked about this a little bit recently. I think Pinky's Row was a slower process. Like it wasn't like you've got 6 months to draft it, you've got 3 months to edit it, and then like I felt like for the first time by necessity because of how much work there was, how much you were like, here's what we have to do. And it was this, so I was like, oh, I have to slow down. Like I've never had a book be like, this is, and I actually feel it even more now. I'm like, for the next book, I'm just like, to write these kinds of books where you really dig into a character and the language and you get to play with theme throughout, and it takes time. I mean, I know people do it amazingly. I don't know how they do it, but I know people do that incredibly within like a book a year. This just felt like a luxury to get to write it and to get to have it loved the way it was loved by both you and, the editors at Emily Bestler and, the whole team, to just be like, wow, I don't want to do it a different way. The next book is also not a police procedural. And I love that we can, it's almost like I never gave myself permission. I never took permission to just really be in it. And that's a game changer. And whether I write a book that has a police officer or features a police officer or not, I'm not going to go back to, I want the time. I want to dig deep. And I know that for me, the first draft is really, really messy. And so
Same. I think for everybody, the first draft was really, really messy. And the many drafts that follow that are
yeah, I was
also
going to say probably in the ninth or 10th.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
but I do feel like it's what I learned, and you made me retype it.
Yeah, I did. That's a good technique for
It's
anybody who's
amazing. It's
yeah.
torture, but it's
Mhm.
amazing. And all I did was open the old file at the top and the new file at the bottom. And then every time I'd be like, oh, I thought I'd edited that, but there's another door, or there's another, or there's another, awkward, or I've used that word twice in this page. I mean, it's the things you catch, and also reading it out loud, which is the final thing. And even that, you're like, how is it possible I'm still making changes? And when we listened to a sample of it for audio, I immediately was like, "Ooh!" Like I'm still like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
could." I mean, I don't know if you ever get to the point where you're like, "Oh, it's perfect."
I don't think so. I really don't. I think you get to the point where you're satisfied enough, at
Yeah.
least in my
I mean,
experience.
I am. I'm really tickled with the way this book ended up, and I learned. I mean, I think I learned more. I do. I mean, I loved getting my MFA, which I did in my 30s. But I feel like I learned so much about writing and craft and process in this book, and you know, I'm really, really proud of it. I mean, I probably
I
would be
think
proud of
readers
it.
are going to be able to tell too. They're going to pick it up and be like, this thing is crystalline. It feels so emotionally deep. It feels so thought through. It feels so well developed. And also, it's gorgeous on the line level. So I think you've really done it. And I think people are going to love it.
Thank you. Well, I mean, thank you, because honestly, Danya, like, I'm not kidding. I give you so much credit for really pushing me beyond. There were times when I was like, I just don't think I can do this
I
again.
pushed you right up to the edge, but we
You
had so
did.
much
I
fun.
was, I think at some point I was even over the edge, just like
Yeah, just
hanging
like
on.
by the fingernails. Yeah.
But but I think loving, like, knowing what you really want a book to be, like really recognizing the work it takes to get something to that level, I think was something I don't even know if I could have done it in my
Mhm.
30s. I think it also took, I'm like in this headspace now where I'm like, good stuff takes time.
And now we just get to do it again, which is really fun.
And again and again and
And
again.
again and again and again. It's actually like what a joy, what a dream. So fun for us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for telling us all about the book. This was very fun to play host for a second. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. I did like a deep dive before recording this, and it's been so cool to see you interviewing other people and interacting with their books. I just feel like what a great space for readers and writers everywhere.
I do, and I really love the Killer Room podcast. And it sounds like I just heard you say that your next book is out June 2027. So we have a spot saved.
Amazing. Book me up. I'm in.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate Pinky Swear with my incredible agent and author, Danya Kukafka. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.